The evangelist's eyes scanned the small group of people, searching for a response to his question. His voice rang out with conviction as he declared, "You are all sinners, but through Jesus, you can become children of God today." He stared expectantly at the faces before him, eagerly awaiting someone to heed his call for salvation. "And when you accept Jesus into your heart," he continued, "God will see his Son in you." The evangelist stood on a makeshift stage in the bustling city square, his voice amplified by a megaphone. A man in the crowd challenged him, shouting that he had no right to judge others as sinners. The evangelist's eyes lit up with passion as he responded, "Sir, I am not judging you. I am simply sharing what God has already judged." He continued, "And if you struggle to see yourself as a sinner, let me ask you this. Have you ever told a lie? Stolen anything, no matter how small?" The man nodded reluctantly. "See, we are all guilty," the evangelist proclaimed. "But what do you call someone who tells lies and steals, a liar and a thief?" The man looked down in shame and admitted, "I guess I am a liar and a thief." The evangelist pressed on, "So by your own admission, you are a sinner. Do you still refuse to see it?" The evangelist thundered into the microphone, sweat beading on his forehead as he preached fire and brimstone to the crowd. As I shivered in the cold wind, I quietly slipped out of the crowded tent. This type of preaching was all too familiar to me. I had even used it myself in the past with great success. But after spending years healing from a tumultuous childhood with narcissistic parents and a jealous brother, I began to question if this was truly in line with biblical teachings. Sure, it may be easier to convince someone to accept Christ by telling them their identity is defined by their sins, but it felt eerily similar to how my parents would manipulate and guilt trip us growing up. Maybe there was a better way to share God's message of love and forgiveness. As I trudged through the snowy streets of Tromsø, I couldn't shake off the memories of my childhood. My parents' words rang in my ears, reminding me of how worthless and flawed they thought I was for every mistake I made. The cold wind whipped against my face, stinging with icy fingers, as I reflected on my journey to break free from their toxic beliefs. But even when I found solace in mainstream Christianity in 2001, I was once again told that I was a sinner, a liar, and a thief. The only difference now was that God saw Jesus in me and not my sins. It was difficult for me to understand how someone who had been constantly told they were nothing but a sinner could suddenly shift their mindset and see themselves as a beloved child of God just because he sees Jesus in them. If only God had seen me as myself. Even after accepting him into my life, it would have been easier for me to grasp this concept. But instead, I struggled with the idea that my identity could be so easily overshadowed by someone else's presence within me. As I walked past Tromsø Domkirke, my thoughts were interrupted by a sudden jolt. My foot had slipped on a hidden patch of ice under the snow, and I struggled to regain my balance. Just as I was about to hit the cold ground, my body jerked back into an upright position. As I stood there trying to steady my heart rate, the question lingered in my mind. Is it truly biblical for our sins to define our identity? Memories of a Bible story surfaced, where Jesus meets a rich young ruler and walks him through the commandments. But then it dawned on me, the rich young ruler never confesses his sins directly. Was I mistaken about this all along? As my feet shuffled on the icy path, I glanced at the grand entrance of Tromsø Domkirke and noticed a sign announcing its extended hours. Battling against strong gusts, I made my way inside the church, feeling grateful for shelter from the blizzard-like conditions outside. After shedding my jacket and settling onto a wooden pew, I opened the well-worn pages of the Bible in front of me. As the snow relentlessly pounded against the stained glass windows, mimicking the chaos in my mind, I sat alone in the stillness of the church. My fingers flipped through the pages of the Bible, searching for an answer. And there it was. Nowhere did it say that our sins defined us. It was a realization that struck me. The original readers of the Bible didn't even know about the concept of a sin nature. To them, every person was born without sin and capable of following the Torah perfectly. It was only through willful rejection or ignorance that one would stray from its teachings. And even then, they were viewed as missing the mark rather than being defined by their mistakes. I gently turned the thin, worn pages of my Bible to Genesis 1. As I read the words, I couldn't help but notice something intriguing. In this ancient text, the first readers saw every person as carrying a piece of God within them. It was a powerful reminder that being human was to be created in the image of God. This idea of individuality and self-expression was celebrated throughout the Bible, reminding us that our unique identities are a reflection of our divine Creator. And even though we may fall short at times, our inherent worth as humans made in His image would never change. The weight of the leather-bound Bible felt soothing in my hands as I closed it with a satisfying thump. Through the stained glass windows, the soft glow of yellow streetlights danced on the snow-covered ground outside. I leaned back in the polished wooden pew and let out a small sigh. My gaze drifted to the altar at the front of the church, where a large wooden cross loomed behind it. As I whispered to myself, you never wanted our sins to define us, and you never intended for us to lose our individuality by accepting Jesus. A sense of peace washed over me. As I stepped out of the church, a soft layer of snow crunched under my boots. The blizzard had died down, revealing a serene winter wonderland. The moon shone bright above, casting a beautiful glow on the city lights of Tromsø. Braving the cold, I made my way to the bus stop, feeling grateful for the peacefulness around me. In that moment, I realized that God was not like my strict and judgmental parents. He accepted me for who I was and didn't want me to lose my individuality by conforming to religious expectations.